So when I kind of sit down, then you can start it.
Just whenever you're ready.
Yeah, sure. All right, Gavin. So I guess we can just edit this out. I don't really know the best way to start this, but
yeah. I'll start by saying thanks for meeting me. How's that?
There we go. Yeah.
There you go. Okay.
That's a good idea.
Thanks for meeting me, Phil. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for coming.
No bother. And you know we're here. I agreed to talk about the workshop and how I performed in that. So it's great to have your advice and your opinion. Never been video before, so I know we had no doubt played golf the other night. We've talked about it a wee bit before.
Yeah, that was fun.
I think it was good. Yeah, it was super.
But we each got a little bit of a taste into coaching each other up on the range, right?
Yeah, Europe versus Ireland, USA versus Europe.
Yeah, of course. Hopefully the USA was better represented at the driving range than it was at the Ryder Cup. But, but that's a story for another day, I suppose. But thanks for coming because as you said, looking for advice on how to better the way you can give a presentation as a coach. The first step to getting better at anything is, like you said, rewashing yourself even when you've never done it before. Most people have never seen themselves talk in front of people, but most people are terrified to even do the first step of speaking in front of people. So being able to watch yourself and then talk to others about it is a huge step toward getting a lot better at what you do, which then in turn helps other people you're coaching or other coaches be better at what they do. So it's a big deal.
No, I agree. And then that email I had sent to you, looking back on the performance, sort of disappointed, and then when I seen it possibly again, I thought it wasn't too bad. So, but the things I would like you hopefully to help me with again, as in the email, would be maybe talking too fast. And I thought I was nervous and thought I was folding my arms too much.
Okay.
And I didn't address everyone.
Right.
Which I felt, and then I also again, because it was the first time, and the way I never discovered it, just when I was in the room that day, I was thinking more about helping other people out than what I was thinking about presenting my own workshop later. So what I really should have done was have a look around the room and planned it out a bit better. So that was the last point that I sort of sent to you. I maybe should have had everybody more active.
Okay. Yeah.
And I thought maybe I'd sort of let myself down by not having everybody more active. I know they were involved, but maybe doing it again, would maybe get everybody to produce a picture or a poster or have some scribbles up that they could relate back to.
A couple of different ways, a couple of different avenues to go down for learning and teaching. Yeah. Okay. Well, so if we're just going to start from a very base perspective here, I thought it was a good presentation, but I want to hear more of your feelings or emotions behind it as you were going through. So as you were giving your presentation, like during it, how did you feel you were doing?
I always feel under pressure underneath the clock, because I'd done it the night before and it was 41 minutes and I thought I need to get this down quickly, and I thought I had got it down, but the time I just watching my video back again, I talked too much.
Okay.
And then I think when we were playing golf, you'd sort of, when you were advised and you'd watch the video again and you said maybe some of the slides were up too long. And then when I went back and looked at that, I do agree with that.
Yeah, well, and that's a tough thing to balance. Like you said, when you practiced it was longer than you wanted, but then at the same time, what you referenced a couple minutes ago is you try to be careful of speaking too fast. So it's like, how do you speed up the presentation without then rushing through maybe valuable information or run the risk of being not clear to people because you're rushing. So no, it's good that you recognize that, but definitely something we'll talk about. And then what about like immediately afterwards, right? When you finish the presentation, people give you a couple claps and then you go and sit down. How did that feel?
I still was nervous with myself and was disappointed again because I knew, just what I said about the layout of the room. We sort of had like a row of chairs, and to me it sort of, maybe subconsciously it sort of like formed a barrier. When I had when I had given everybody a card, my concept was to put those around the room.
Okay.
And then everybody get up, walk about, have a discussion about what picture appealed to them, come back with it. But because it's not it wasn't the room's fault, it was my fault, but and because I was running low in time, I just put them out in front of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So I would have liked to have had everybody up.
Yeah. Okay.
Active, and that's back to your question. I was disappointed after the, and I'm hard on myself as well. So
Yeah. Well. Yeah. I mean that. I understand that can be tough. Sometimes things go so perfectly in your head, and then when you get into the actual presentation, it's tough. And it always seems like, right when you're done with something, you have that moment when you go, oh, could have done this.
yeah,
It's kind of like right when you leave your house, you realize what you forgot.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But so obviously you said you watched it.
Yeah.
Did you get to watch it a couple times or just once?
I watched it. The first time I watched it, I didn't watch it at all. Just watched the wee bits and pieces.
Right.
Obviously, we were discussing earlier that it's sometimes the first time you've ever seen yourself. So I was saying I have seen myself on TV because of the football, but you're subconsciously thinking about how heavy you are, how grey is your hair, how bad is your accent. Sort of cringe watching it the first time, and then the second time I watched it, I sort of was looking more at the content of what I was actually putting across. So I was a wee bit more pleased with what I'd done, but it's still an uncomfortable experience going through it. Yeah.
So it did alter your perspective or your feelings of it a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I figured, and I think that's the case with most people in that. So I mean that's normal. It's good because obviously when you look back at something, you're going to see different elements, especially if you watch it a couple times. But so aside from the mannerisms or delivery that we've been talking about, like you said, worried about speaking too fast or doing the wrong things with your hands. Aside from those mannerisms or delivery, what do you think, when looking back on it, you could have changed? I know you touched on maybe where you put those laminates or whatever. But.
Yeah, well, that's not really. I think I briefly spoke to Tandy afterwards, and she said maybe I could have put the video second, give everybody my cards and then show the video. My reason, which is a good valid point, and I love the feedback. My reason for showing the video first was I thought it would be a nice way for people just to relax into it, and maybe
that's a good point. Yeah.
Maybe experience the feelings, of watching the brothers fail. Martin said he was angry because he was looking at it from a coach's perspective.
Oh, yeah.
Because the guy had basically run off too fast, so he had just trashed his training plan. I think Aaron says he was emotional, maybe tearful. So that's my reason behind the video, but showing it first. But then it might have worked better putting it second, because people could have worked together through the cards and had that group discussion. And then by showing the video second, they might have thought a bit more deeply and got more in tune with their emotions. But if I do it again, I would try it video second.
That's a good point, because I think both ways have their own merits to them. Because there certainly is something to be said about easing into the presentation and getting everybody to relax a little bit, as you said. And it was an emotional video, as you mentioned, or as everybody talked about during it. Maybe just going forward, something that you do a little bit of trial and error with, because there's really nothing that replaces trial and error.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, I mean, either way, I'm sure it'll work fine. But so, what do you think you learned about yourself as a presenter after you watched it? Anything that you learned new that you didn't know before?
I haven't presented sort of literature or stuff, but I have done post-match analysis, but I've never had the camera on me watching myself deliver it.
Right.
So you had raised good points, when we were playing golf, maybe I was folding my arms too much, and I think that's a sign of being nervous. Maybe I also realise that when I'm probably doing it now, I talk too quick, but my actions, I do a lot of this stuff, and it's probably not relevant, So the question that, if I was going to do that again and I realise that I'm doing that, I could maybe think about curtailing it a bit or doing it with more purpose.
Well, it's good that you're conscious of that. I would say I think moving around a bit is maybe better than being as stiff as a board the whole time. But so of course you just want to make sure you're not out there just punching the air and just moving in every direction. But I think you were okay for the most part on that. Like you said, you mentioned the talking too fast, folding arms, maybe not addressing everybody. And I did do like you said, a detailed watch through of your your presentation. But then also like you said, you also did, was I marked a couple spots to come back to, and then watch a couple areas a little bit more detailed. And so, and you'll probably be happy to hear this. I didn't think you were ever talking too fast. I thought, maybe sometimes your volume was just a little low.
Yeah.
So, when you mentioned that you were feeling a little bit nervous, anytime somebody's nervous, they can feel themselves nervous, but other people can usually see it too.
Yeah.
And so, I didn't think that it was ever a hindrance, like a significant hindrance to your presentation. Certainly not speaking too fast. But I noticed a couple times where you seemed a little nervous, your volume just went down.
Really, okay.
And so something that we've talked or joked about is you said, Americans are generally very positive, and then I would add that almost to a fault, Americans are pretty loud.
Yeah.
So perhaps if you have to think about it this way, almost try to do a caricature of being an American as you're giving a presentation. Just start yelling. But
well, I'll just have to.
Yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah.
But so like I said, the volume I think could be maybe a little bit more level or raised, but I thought the speed of your talking was good.
Thank you.
The thing that you did touch on that I think was dead on though was the folding the arms.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was necessarily a high and tight folding the arms or being real closed off or anything. But I counted 5 times that I thought it was a significant amount of time, where it was more than just a quick fold and unfold. And then one other thing was hands in pockets.
Yes.
It wasn't really both hands in pockets. It was usually just one hand that was closer to the audience. Yeah. And so that would make sense being closer to the audience because it's anytime you're nervous, just naturally closing off a little bit. Yeah. And I would say it seemed like those things, as you'd expect, would coincide a little bit with talking a little bit quieter. So I didn't think I noticed a common theme with that and certain parts of your presentation. It was a bit more random. But I think that's something that you need to just focus on, just being more open. Literally open.
No, you've touched a good point there because I don't like to be the centre of attention. I know I'm fun or I joke when I'm in private, but I don't like to be. It's all about me sort of thing. I'd rather it's more about the other people. So that's probably part of the reason why I was doing that. Yeah, it's a good point.
No, it's okay. It's a common thing, and especially if like you said, you haven't seen yourself on video before. It's very tough until you see it and watch it and focus in on it as hard as it can be to get the message kind of through to your head of can't do that. And then another thing that you mentioned was you were a little worried that you maybe didn't address everybody. And you touched on maybe you didn't address Wayne directly, but I thought overall you did a very good job involving everybody, and I know you at least asked everybody questions, and everybody was pretty engaged. Even when I was watching the video, you could actually see everybody watching, and I thought everybody was sitting up, good posture, and focused on you the whole time. So in terms of engagement, I thought it was very good. And specifically after that video of the Brownlee brothers at the beginning, I thought you did a very good job asking each individual person what their emotions were, what they thought of the video, and you got very varying answers. And as you said, Martin came from the coaching perspective, and I think Aaron, said, it almost made her want to cry or something, and maybe Rory, I can't remember, said they had goosebumps. But you did a good job, I thought, with that.
Well, that's a good point too, and that's maybe why Tandy's saying show the video second, because when I was asking for the opinions immediately after the video, there's like a silence, and I think maybe people were hesitant to answer. Okay. Or maybe scared of putting themselves up for ridicule or putting their thoughts forward. So maybe that, again, back to the sequencing, the video may have worked better the second time, but no, thanks. I didn't realise that I had involved everyone, and I was sort of conscious that Wayne is quiet. He seems to be quiet, so I didn't want to force him to speak. If he wants to contribute, he will.
You don't want to make anybody uncomfortable.
So that was another thing that was going on inside my head when I was doing the presentation.
Well, that is a good point though. With this, like where you put the the video, putting it second perhaps, and I think that is definitely a good point. If you do and you should try this perhaps in that next presentation that you make. If you have the interactive stuff first, then people kind of get to know each other a little bit first, and they're just used to talking. Just in the last couple of minutes, they've talked, and so then like you said, just much more comfortable saying something without feeling out of place or,
Yeah.
or not wanting to be the first person to break the silence,
Yeah.
which is always, no matter how confident somebody is, it's tough to be the first person to break the
Yeah.
silence.
Yeah, no.
So that's good that you noticed that. I think that'll definitely be probably certainly one of, but maybe the most important thing to look at if you switch those
Yeah.
and see if there's a difference in the engagement after that video.
Yeah.
And so, if I were to go through your presentation chronologically, and these are just some things I wrote down as I was going through it on the detailed watch. I thought the intro and the pre-summary or schedule slide was very good. It clearly laid out what everybody should expect and what we were going to be learning. So that was very good. And then, like we just talked about, there was good questioning after the video. We like we were just saying, it went to each individual person, got their feelings about it, and then it turned into a good conversation. I thought that was, despite maybe not being one of your focal points, it turned into one of the best conversations in total. What do you think? It went for a few minutes.
No, I didn't realise it because I was probably nervous at the time, but it's good to get that feedback from you. And then when I did watch it, it was interesting. They did have the goosebumps, the emotion, the tears. So I didn't think about the conversation being good at the time, but now that you've mentioned it, I can see where it would have looked okay. Yeah.
And the thing I especially liked that you did was you added a little extra nugget to that of, when you said, how would you feel if the brothers were switched?
Yeah, which is true. Yeah, that happened. Yeah.
Yeah. So did you say? Could you describe that again? Was that like the year prior? Or?
Yeah. So the year prior, the roles were reversed, and the other brother was suffering.
Okay.
So the guy who helped the other guy, he was left by himself.
Oh, okay.
And that was basically because he understood the context of it.
Yeah.
And that was the big picture, So it's just interesting. It's just one of those things.
Yeah.
You don't know how human nature is going to behave. So.
Yeah, and it was a good thing to bring up because, like we found out, none of us knew about what happened a year prior. And so it just quickly turns all the emotions around, or just flips it on its head.
Yeah, and I had to raise that to a good point, because what I maybe missed out on, or what I should have said there, was that's maybe when a coach is talking to a player, you've got totally different, the player seeing it as, I'm running off and leaving my brother here, whereas the coach might be saying, I'll stand and help you. Or else that could be reversed as well, the player may not want to help the coach or help the team. So that's what hopefully I was trying to link that in the reflective practice, and as a coach, you don't see everything the way everybody else sees it.
Right.
You see what you want to see at times.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
Maybe you can use a reflection to think about it, and then come back at a different view. Yeah,
definitely get that tunnel vision from whatever your perspective is. Sometimes you need to walk a mile in someone else's shoes, as they say.
Yeah.
So I thought that did a good job of that, because that was, for me, just sitting in the audience was an unexpected twist, because I mean, first of all, just the video you showed was crazy in and of itself, but the fact that it happened, and the fact that there was a similar situation with the same two brothers a year prior is just a whole other wrinkle to the story, and that definitely added a whole other layer to things.
That was interesting. Thank you.
But so that was good. And then as you moved on, you were talking about and defining reflective practice.
Yeah.
And there was one thing that I really liked that I think you should definitely keep in. That was you were relating reflective practice to other things, and just not just coaches or players writing something down after a practice or a game, but you mentioned the medical field.
Yep.
And nurses or doctors, and not just the things that they maybe have to hand in after a routine appointment, but post-operation, post-surgery. If you have 6 people working on one person on a table, and whether something goes right or wrong, especially if something goes wrong, all of them have to journal it and write down their thoughts on it, and what happened, and what can get better and what can get worse. And I think something like that is very relatable. I'm not saying that the audience would be doctors, but it's because it's such a strong example.
Yes.
I think it puts into perspective, as a coach, after poor performance by a player, what happened, what went wrong immediately afterwards. And I thought that was
interesting.
Good comparison.
I try to do that with all my. I've now started to keep a wee diary, so I'll keep a diary, and then it draws out new meanings, and that's what hopefully I was trying to get the guys in the presentation. the pickup on. So
Right.
that's part of the reason here.
But yeah, so that was very good. And then right in the same area of the presentation, there's one thing I thought you could have done a little bit better. So you, like I said, you defined the reflective practice extremely well. And as the presentation went on, you gave the why reasons for reflective practice, which was good. But I think at the earlier stage in the presentation, you could give a bigger, more encompassing why. Yeah. And that's because there are a good amount of people that need to know that why early on, otherwise they tune out. Yeah. And I think I would be one of those people, and I didn't tune out because obviously, you know, it's just 5 of us when we're watching somebody's presentation that we know. But if you have a room full of coaches or parents or whatever have you, and you got somebody sitting 30 feet away from you, and they sit there for the first few minutes and they might not know what the point is. Yeah. They might just tune out, look down at their phone, or do something else. And so if you give that why, I think it'll help a lot with engagement, which in any workshop is.
No, I agree. Yeah, absolutely agree. Yeah, I know sometimes I'm like that too. I want to know why, and then that's probably why. Hopefully, linking back to what I said earlier about maybe getting them involved with a poster, and then and using that as the why. You know, this will be specific to you. You know, so no, good follow point there. Yeah, address it again. Yeah.
So. Something that I like, as we continue further, was you had those laminates that you said, and so you had the wheel, and just the whole idea of the continuous learning, because it's not step 1, 2, 3, it's in a circle and it just keeps going, and you had that you had essentially the steps, not the ladder, the steps, and because you said the wheel just keeps bouncing up or rolling up, and it doesn't stop, and so you said keep the wheel spinning, and that's something that I liked. It's just it's a simple thing that creates a visual in people's mind. That it's a never-ending process. And then you mentioned don't be afraid to drop back. If the coaching context changes. I think you said something like, if you're coaching 18-year-olds or whatever, then let's say you go to 15-year-olds, might be a completely different context, and what you worked in one area might not work in a different. And so you can't be afraid to go back down a few steps and then get the wheel spinning again. So what did you like? So what drew you to that wheel, and then what did you like so much about it?
Well, I used the wheel last year for my dissertation, and I thought, look, I used 5 coaches and they all got involved and they liked it, but there's different levels of learning, and so the wheel was the simplest thing, and then what you're saying is that I like the simple stuff as well, that has that visual, so in my mind the plan would always be the spinning. That I'll always come back to that, and then I'll have the letters again, so visually in my head, I'm hoping somebody will appreciate the way I learn, but that might not be necessarily for everybody. Right. But I hope that would be a basic thing for them that they could take away from the workshops. And, so it's just a bit of self-creation there, and then Robin and Tandy are very good in the lectures. There's a slide as well that shows this spiral. Yeah. So I just I couldn't get the spiral on the PowerPoint, so the ladders and the wheel sort of replicated that.
Okay, good. Yeah, no, that was nice. And then, as we continued on, you had 3 different steps or 3 different parts, and you used color coding. Yeah. And there's one thing that I know I touched on before the other day, but that was, no matter how good something looks on the computer, sometimes the colors just never show up quite as well on the presentation, whether it's the projector screen or the projector itself, or the screen, or just how far away it is, or the fact that you're not right up next to it like you are with the computer. When you have like a red and a yellow and a red and an orange and a green with like a blue background, sometimes the text or whatever doesn't come through fine. It worked great next to the text, but when the text itself is color coded, sometimes you almost have to make sure it's just a white background and that's it.
Exactly. I'll take that into the next lesson, take that on board, because it does look perfect on the laptop.
Yeah, it always
looks
great.
When you look on that backdrop screen, it's different.
Believe me, everybody's done it, I think.
And then the fact that our presentations were uploaded, so I didn't have the notes as well. Yeah. So that was sort of throwing me, but yeah, definitely I would change the colours next time, and I would also make sure that I fed it through my own laptop rather than preload it. I would make sure, I know you offered to help on the day about having the presentation screen there, but maybe the time constraint, I didn't. I just ignored it.
Right, and it's one of those things that doesn't seem like it's a big thing at all, and it's not a big thing.
Yeah.
But it's like it's one of those things that you don't notice that it's good when it's good, but you notice it's bad if it's bad.
Exactly. No, I appreciate that. Yeah.
And so just one of those tiny little things that'll take you 30 seconds to fix, and I'm sure you'll get it fixed no problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that'll help. But then on the flip side of that, you actually did a really good job acknowledging that somebody in the audience might be colorblind, because I think Martin mentioned something about that. And so you did, when those colors came down, say which colors they were and relate that. So that was actually a good thing to notice, because I know the vast majority of people would just never think of that.
So that wee point, it actually comes from working with disabled kids and working with people who are colourblind, so I'm always aware if they have that disability. The cones that you use, some of the kids can't see a yellow cone on a green grass. So therefore you gotta ask them what colours do they stand out for them that will be visible on the grass, so it's just it's a thing that I've picked up.
No, that is a good point, and I think that should help you a lot. Just work like the work that you've done with those people in general. I think will help you in a lot of presentations. It's funny. It makes me remember a time that I was playing in a golf tournament. Probably my first experience with a situation like that. I must have been 14 or 15 years old, and I was using a red marker for my golf ball on the green, and some kid I was playing with, I remember walked in and just stepped straight on my mark with spiked shoes, and just right in front of it, and scuffed up the line. And I didn't say anything, but I looked at him, like he was crazy or something. And he looks at me and he kind of looks down. So he must have done it before. And he goes, oh, are you using a red mark? And I said, yeah. He goes, sorry, I'm red-green colorblind. It just all looks the same color. And I just laughed. Of course, I felt almost embarrassed. I just laughed and said, okay, sorry, it's fine. I'll just switch it to a white one.
You weren't to know, you can take that with you again,
So I think your experience with that stuff will probably help you make presentations more relatable and easy to understand then.
Thank you.
And so, I thought, you did a good job working the room during discussion time. When Martin and I were doing the individual stuff, and then we had the three to the side because they were all team sports. So during that time you gave for discussion, I thought you did a good job working around the room, and just popping in, asking a question, maybe give a little solution here or there. The one thing I think during discussion time that could have been improved a little bit, and perhaps it was just because of a time constraint, is just cleaning up the directions, whether it's verbal or visual, just so it's clear and simple what you're looking for everybody to do. I don't think it was far off. But just you almost have to somehow, when you look at your presentation, when you're editing it, think, all right, I'm sitting here and I know nothing about this at all.
Well, you're right. So if I was to go back on my presentation, maybe take about 5 slides out of it. And I would just to fill with a minute and a half.
Okay.
And I think that's what Tandy was just funny, because I only found the notes about listen, I researched how to do the presentation, but then that night after I'd done the presentation, I found the notes on Blackboard. I remember about them. I'm forgetful at times. And then one of them was, if you're going to finish at 30 minutes, say, I'm running out of time here, this is what we'll do.
Okay.
So that's, again, as you were saying, I should have done that. I maybe could have cut a couple of slides out, and that would have left the clear time for doing that. Distinctions that you're saying, the verbal and the
well, that's good. And like I said, I didn't think you were way off with any of it necessarily. Just the simpler a presentation can be, sometimes usually the better. But yeah, I mean, you incorporated everything pretty well into the role playing and discussion. I thought the writing segment was good. You said it was a little bit rushed, but don't need to touch on that again. I think that's something that we've covered pretty good today. As long as you clean some things up, you'll be able to expand that. In theory and in the idea behind the writing, I think is a very good thing, integral part of your workshop, and so I think that's big. And then, like you said, just had to rush to finish, and so beyond those things cleaning up, maybe spend a little bit less time on that intro slide. Like I said, it was very good. It was a very good slide, but it's just, I remember when I was looking through some of the details, that slide, the schedule slide, was up for a solid 2 minutes, which maybe takes away from some other spots. And just, because it's pretty important to just leave everybody with that key takeaway at the end, a little bit of a summary slide. But so I mean, that mostly covers what I took from your presentation.
Super, thank you.
As for going forward, there is a little model I like to use. So I just wrote it down here, but it's this grow model.
Oh yeah.
So or a T-grow model if you
Yeah.
want to include topic above it.
Yeah.
But so it's just something simple, and you could almost think of it in the way like your wheel that you use in your presentation. You know, the G is goal. You know, what is your goal in
Yeah.
with your presentation, and then the R is reality. What is it currently today?
Yeah.
And then O is options. You know, when you look at the reality, what are your options for improving it? And then the last one is the way forward, putting that plan. You know, implementing that plan.
Yeah.
And so if we compare this to what we've been talking about today,
Yeah.
you know, what would you, if you could just briefly run me through that and what do you think you would?
I will. The goal would definitely be finish on time,
Mm-hmm.
and then the reality is take some slides out.
Okay.
You know, and as you say, be aware of the time that I'm using, and then the options again would get the guys more active
Okay.
and change the room, and the way forward is probably do it again and see how that new model works.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, simple enough. I think that's definitely a good goal. And what's nice about this too is you could have this one wheel and you could have another goal that's another wheel. So you could have two wheels spinning at once. I mean, as many as you're comfortable with, as many different goals as you want. But that's a perfect example. And no, like I said, I think it was generally a very good presentation, and just with this conversation, and it seems like you're pretty keen to improve on it. I'm sure it'll be an unbelievable presentation in no time, and because you'll improve, no problem. So yeah, like I said, thanks for meeting with me today.
Thank you for taking time out to meet with me.
But yeah,
Cheers, mate.
yeah,
Thank
cheers.
you. Well done. Well done. Hopefully they didn't make that phone too much. Hopefully the camera's still running.
Yep.